We are absolutely obsessed with the comeback story. You know the exact narrative I'm talking about, right? Someone hits absolute rock bottom, and then bam, there's this dramatic, cinematic turning point. A montage kicks in, the music swells, and they rebuild their entire life off the back of one single monumental decision. We love it. It's deeply inspiring. We're going to unpack a pretty fascinating reality. That whole cinematic shape, it's almost entirely a myth. The actual pattern of a comeback is, well, it's far less glamorous, but honestly, it's infinitely more useful. It's a real, tangible blueprint that anyone in a genuinely hard position can actually use. So, we're going to look really closely at how stabilization is the true hidden engine that enables lasting progress.
Okay, let's dive into this. The media's highlight reel is pretty much completely divorced from reality. The Hollywood version compresses everything down into one dramatic decision because, frankly, that's what looks good on camera. It's shareable, it makes for a great 2-hour movie, you know? But the reality is actually just a series of small, unglamorous, highly repetitive steps. If you're going through a tough chapter yourself, buying into that Hollywood version is actually a terrible strategy. Because if you just sit around waiting for this one big lightning bolt moment to magically fix everything at once, you're totally setting yourself up for failure. That moment just doesn't happen the way we're told it does. Think about this. The turning point makes a good scene. It is rarely the whole story. When researchers actually sit down and study individuals who have recovered from severe setbacks, we're talking about massive hurdles like homelessness, bankruptcy, or addiction. They consistently find that the whole turning point concept is basically a narrative illusion. Behind almost every single successful recovery case, they don't find a sudden fix-all decision. Nope. Instead, they find a much longer, way less dramatic process happening behind the scenes. Real life just doesn't have a fast-forward button. True recovery is a very slow burn. The stabilization phase. This is the absolute, non-negotiable, invisible groundwork that has to happen before any real progress can start. Research into things like severe financial crisis points right to this consistent first phase. Before anything even remotely resembling long-term growth or rebuilding wealth becomes realistic, a person has to secure basic stabilization. It means just knowing for sure where you're going to sleep tonight, or having a completely predictable route to work, or simply knowing you have enough money for a meal today. You literally have to stop the bleeding before you can even think about healing the wound. And the science behind why this is mandatory is absolutely fascinating. Just look at the biology of it. A brain in crisis is constantly managing acute daily survival stress. It's completely consumed by decision fatigue and willpower depletion. Someone in an acute crisis literally lacks the cognitive bandwidth to handle anything beyond their immediate right-now needs. But when basic needs and routines are finally secured, the human brain suddenly regains the capacity to actually engage in long-term planning and skill building. You can't out-willpower basic human biology. Stabilization isn't just a smart strategy, it's a hardwired neurological prerequisite for growth. So that begs a pretty big question. If this stabilization phase is the biological foundation of literally all progress, why is it always cut from the highlight reel? Why do we never hear about it? Well, the answer is simple. It doesn't look like progress from the outside. A daily routine of just waking up, securing a meal, and going to the same temporary job, that doesn't look heroic on film. But we actively need to reframe this. Those seemingly boring, super repetitive routines are not stagnation. They are massive, heroic victories. Every single day a routine is maintained, the brain is healing its bandwidth. That invisible groundwork is exactly what makes all the visible progress possible later on. And that brings us to another huge myth we really need to bust today. Recovery is rarely a solo project, even when it's told that way. This goes directly against that popular American self-made narrative we hear constantly. When people tell their comeback stories publicly, they tend to paint themselves as these lone wolves who conquered their demons through sheer, isolated grit. But the data? The data tells a completely different story. Needing a support network isn't some kind of weakness. It is a statistically documented necessity. Yeah, the whole myth of solo willpower just completely crumbles when we look at the reality of documented recovery cases. In almost every single successful case studied, there is someone else involved. A friend, a mentor, a community program, a family member. Just imagine a caseworker who checks in for like 15 minutes every Tuesday. That tiny, unglamorous touchpoint often provides the exact concrete resources or even just the consistent belief that keeps a person grounded during that brutal stretch where their own self-belief is starting to fade. The popular narrative quietly erases these supportive figures in the retelling, and that dangerously distorts our understanding of how recovery actually works. Now, I definitely don't want you to think we're saying individual effort is irrelevant here. To be completely fair, individual effort matters enormously. Nobody rebuilds a life entirely passively. But sustainable recovery is an equation. It's individual effort plus external support. These aren't competing ideas. A story that credits only pure willpower or only external support is leaving out half the truth. The effort was very real, and so was the support that made that effort sustainable over the long haul. You absolutely 100% need both. So, the crucial point is, there's an actual, replicable blueprint for recovery, and it shows up consistently across documented cases once you strip away that Hollywood gloss. Here it is. Step 1, stabilize. Secure your basic needs and get a routine going first. Step 2, connect. Accept and actively seek out external support. Lean on people or programs without feeling like it's a weakness. And finally, step 3, build. You rebuild through small, compounding steps, not one giant, dramatic leap. This is a real pattern that real people can actually copy. Let's actually zoom in on that final step for a second, because this is where the magic of compounding really happens. Think of it as the 1% rule, just applied under incredibly hard starting conditions. You don't jump from the bottom straight to the corner office. That's not how it works. A modest job leads to a slightly better job. Building one small skill leads to a slightly larger opportunity. It's gradual. It's consistent. This kind of progress compounds quietly over time. And it is exactly how real wealth, real skills, and real lives are built from scratch. I really want you to absorb this reframe because it's beautiful. The turning point is just the first moment anyone else can see the stabilizing that has already been happening. Listen, if you are in the middle of rebuilding something right now and it feels painstakingly slow, totally unglamorous, and absolutely nothing like a movie moment, that is not a sign you're doing it wrong. Nearly every real comeback looks exactly like that from the inside. When the rest of the world finally points at you and goes, wow, what a turning point, they're really just noticing the invisible, quiet stabilization work you've already been doing for months or maybe even years. You are doing it exactly right. Think about your own life, your own setbacks, your own rebuilding phases. Who was the person that showed up for you during a hard chapter, even if their support wasn't cinematic or dramatic at all? Maybe they just listened. Maybe they let you crash on their couch. Or maybe they just believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself. I would absolutely love for you to share that in the comments below, because recognizing those quiet heroes and validating the invisible work of stabilization, that is how we finally understand the real comeback pattern. Thanks so much for joining me today. And hey, keep putting in that quiet, compounding work.